want the movie to evoke time before the pitch clock, like baseball as it existed before that. Not even just 10 years ago, but like 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Hi, this is Tom Gleason. You're listening to All Over the Place, where the fun sanity never ends.
Hello and welcome back to the All Over the Place podcast. I am your host, Eric Porvoznik, and as always, so very thankful for all of our listeners as we continue to grow the podcast around the world. Liking, sharing, subscribing, we appreciate all of it. Thank you so much. Those thanks, of course, on behalf of Team All Over the Place. However, two members, Jim and Marty, are on the bench this week as I had an opportunity, blessed and unique opportunity, to speak with Carson Lund, the director, writer, producer, and editor of the movie Eephus. Great little baseball movie, and also featuring a guy down there, Bill Lee, a former friend of, I guess he's still a current friend too, but a friend of the Looking for Oscar documentary I did many moons ago. But Bill has a cameo in the movie Eephus, and that's one of the many things we're going to be talking about with Carson. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you'll notice that it's just going to be a still of me in between Carson's amazing answers and the conversation because my camera was off during the interview. It's the way it goes when you're working the media junket. But we had an amazing time with Carson, and let's get to it, talking about the movie Eephus. And Carson Lund, welcome to All Over the Place. Great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you, Eric.
Big baseball guy. Obviously, you can tell from the movie you are a huge baseball fan. And what inspired you to make this love letter to men's rec league?
I've been playing in a rec league out here in California for the last 10 years. Go Soldiers. We're playing the PCBL. It's a wooden bat league here in LA. Played my whole life, so baseball is kind of like central to my identity, but I've had a shifting kind of relationship to it throughout the years. But what really struck me about this rec league was that it's such a unique way to form bonds with people. It's in a competitive context, but it only happens once a week. But I've been playing with the same people for 10 years now, and we all have different lives outside of that space, but we all come to that field and share the passion for the game and kind of have a version of ourselves that we create on that field that, I thought that would be a really fascinating way to tell a story, and also to use a structure that's very much like not part of Hollywood screenwriting templates, right? Like a baseball game, like let's do 9 innings and let's set ourselves a challenge of figuring out how to make this game, a sort of like collective suburban portrait of all these people going through a self-realization process. It was a slow dawning process, but it was written during COVID, so we had a lot of time to be creative and just kind of think through all the different ways this thing might come to pass.
Good old PCBL. I've been out here in Phoenix now for 10 years. I did a couple of PCBL. I'm an umpire by trade.
Nice.
Well, actually, I'm a high school baseball coach now, although the umping's been put on the back burner a little bit. But I had you guys in a PCBL game, so I hope the umpires there are treating you well. They're my friends. I'm sure they do. And one of the things I love about the movie, and like I say, it's a 9-inning game. You've got it in like obviously real time, but it's inning by inning, and the audio nuances going on in the background. You hear like, "Hey, Blue, you're squeezing me there," or guys ribbing each other throughout the game. How important was that for you to capture all of these little nuances of the game?
Yeah, I wanted it to feel like it feels to play the game. I think the baseball movies that are sort of popular and canonized, and some of them are good movies, but they don't really capture the texture of it and the flow of it and the rhythm and the weird kind of character. They don't always capture the kind of strange characters that are drawn to the game. And I really wanted to place the viewer right there on the field with them. And part of that was, like creating that really rich 3-dimensional soundscape in 5:1, and having kind of like just such a profusion of off-screen one-liners that you can't even keep track, and it's coming at you from all sides. I mean, that's how it feels to play a baseball game, and you're hearing voices from all over the field, very far away from you. And then you're also hearing the voices of those in the dugout right next to you. So I wanted you to feel as a viewer like you're there with them, and you're kind of like just passing the time. You're kind of lost in the moment, and you're immersed in a way that I think has become very hard in the modern world, to just become immersed in one thing, at any given point in time, because there's so much going on. I think this film is an ode to the effort that is required to just like really place yourself in a moment, and that's what all these characters are doing.
I loved that. I also love the interstitials. As a baseball fan, the first one starting out, you see attendance zero. Just little things like that. We know how men's league games are. I always tell the guys, that everyone's all amped up. It's like, guys, there's no scouts in the stands, just your girlfriends and wives and maybe some kids. Relax, it's a game. And again, the different quotes in between and the interstitials, just capturing baseball so beautifully. Also, this movie set, of course, out in New England. New Englanders have a special relationship with baseball, and talk to us about that and how much you wanted to get that across. The unique New England take on baseball.
Yeah, I'm from New Hampshire originally, so
Yep.
yeah, I think what's so special about that region is obviously, well, it's part of it's the Red Sox, and feeling like I grew up around people who had been underdogs forever, or felt wronged or rejected, or because of the Bambino curse, things like that. So everyone's always complaining about that. I grew up around those people. But also there's the fact that you can only play baseball during 2 seasons, spring and summer, and then fall, you're just trying to get as much as you can in before it's too cold to play anymore and your hands hurt too much when you hit the ball. Um, yeah, and so that kind of fleeting moment in time, the late October baseball that's played just before the first snows, that's something I really wanted to put on screen. And over the course of the film, over the course of the production, like the leaves were blooming and then falling, and we felt the passage of time very acutely out there on the field, which is, I think, what the characters are feeling as well, knowing that it's going to be a long winter, and when winter's over, they won't even have a field anymore. So I wanted to capture all that feeling, and also I wanted to capture just some of the ephemera of the region that I recall from growing up there, and those are memories of mine, and memories of my two co-writers as well. One of whom I grew up with in Nashua, and then the other one grew up in Rhode Island. So we're all New Englanders, but all brought our own little reference points, and some of those you see on kind of the different business advertisements on the wall, the signs, and also like character cameos, like Joe Castiglione, the Red Sox radio broadcast announcer who just retired, which actually is a funny rhyme with the character on screen. At the time, we didn't know he was going to retire, but the character on screen is interested in retiring. And also,
Prescient, very nice.
yeah, and then Bill Lee as well, spaceman, pitched for the Red Sox in the '70s.
What was it like having that unique voice of Bill the spaceman, especially since he's the man with the Eephus? He's involved pretty much with the name of the movie.
Yeah. No, it was a dream come true. I mean, we wrote that scene kind of basing some of the character's language off of Zach Greinke, who's one of the few pitchers who still throws an Eephus periodically. But I knew I wanted to cast someone who felt like a sort of phantom from baseball's past, and who had this like mystical quality, and there's kind of no one better than Bill for that. So I just called him, and he has a landline in Vermont, and we maintained a correspondence, and he was happy to do the film. He loves the spotlight, and he brings so much energy to that one inning that he pitches in the film.
I won't give anything away with the mysticism that followed with that one. That was I had Bill in a 1970s baseball documentary that I did many moons ago, and yeah, he's unique to say the least. But one of the things I learned at the Q&A after the screening last night was nobody puts words in my mouth. You try to give him, keep him on screen, and then he's like, wait, what's my line?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. He needed that at some point. He would start to get tired, and then he would ask for it. But I think he was at his best when he was just riffing, and he's someone who can pull from an entire history of quotes and memories and anecdotes and just characters he's met along the way, and you're kind of like you're just being kind of bombarded with all these details. It's really incredible to just spend some time with him.
We mentioned all those voices that you hear just in the background, and once he's in that game, even when he's not on screen, you hear him riffing in the background. Just genius stuff from the spaceman. And
Yeah.
I mentioned at the top that you're a multi hyphenate on this movie. So you're a producer, director, co-writer, and editor. Especially as an editor and producer, what was it like wearing those hats in order to meet your ultimate vision of the movie?
So this is just something I've always kind of done. As a independent filmmaker who started making movies in junior high as a kid, like I have always just been working with limited resources, and when that's the case, you kind of learn all the different tools of the trade, and you get used to having full control over all the elements. So when I make a feature and we have more money than we had before, but we still don't have a lot, you kind of need to cut corners by doing everything yourself, or having other collaborators perform 4 or 5 roles as well. That's just the nature of the beast. And for me though, like editing is, I can't imagine having someone else edit this film, because it's something where when we wrote it, I was already considering every single edit and every single frame and understanding how all those things interacted. So when I did the storyboards, I was also editing, um, and yeah, everything works together, and this was such a kind of idiosyncratic film because of its structure and form, and all the different voices and overlapping dialogue, that it's kind of hard to explain that to someone else. And fortunately, I had help with the editing from Mike, my AD and
Mhm.
co-writer, and he understood it too. So it was a small team in post that really kind of grasped what this film was. But I never really considered handing off the reins, because I, I wouldn't have had the money. Even it wasn't a possibility for me.
Another thing I learned last night at the Q&A, that original cut of the movie about 2:15, 2:20, and you brought it down to about an hour 40, hour 45. So I'm sorry that Commissioner Manfred got in there and sped up your movie. I hope he didn't put a pitch clock on you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I really want the movie to evoke time before the pitch clock, like baseball as it existed before that. Not even just 10 years ago, but like 50, 60, 70 years ago, early baseball. So yeah, that shortening it really had to do with trying to find the essence of the film, without being too rigid about the structure I had conceived, and worrying about, okay, we need every element of the box score accounted for, and we need you to feel all of that quote unquote dead time. I want you to feel some of it, but not to lose track of what the film is really about. It's a human story. So a lot of that had to do with just submitting to festivals for 6, 7 months, and having rejections kind of make me rethink what I was sort of clinging to. And I think at this point we've tried to boil it down to that essence. It's like making a sauce. You keep it on the heat until you get the right viscosity.
I'm stirring the sauce. I'm stirring the sauce. I'm stirring it. Sorry, quick little Goodfellas slip there. My bad.
Yeah,
Um, so, and that's another thing I love about what you're saying. Baseball, it's a languid pace. It's not to be rushed. And great thing in the movie with Franny keeping score, and that's what we used to do, folks. In between innings, moms and dads would teach their kids how to keep score. You weren't bombarded with song after song after song after song. It's baseball. It's meant to be enjoyed at a particular pace, and you nailed that so well. So from baseball guy to baseball guy, thank you for that. And also, I mentioned earlier, you're a multi hyphenate. No, we're gonna use some baseball parlance. You're a utility man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate it. But utility man who also was a coach on set. I had to teach a lot of these guys how to play. I mean, they played at some point in their past. Some of them more recently than others, but yeah, there's so much that goes into being a baseball player, not just how to make the plays and when to run from first to second, but how to anticipate the plays, how to
Right.
look when you're waiting for something to happen, when you're in the dugout watching. There's so much about how these players carry themselves and all the gestures that go into that. So yeah, there was I wish we could have had more rehearsal time, but what really was special was like being there on the field with all these guys for a month. And they were practicing in between takes and after lunch, and whenever there was a little bit of downtime, they'd be out there trying to perfect their craft.
That's another thing I really liked about the movie. That each character on screen, whether the 18 to 20 people total between the two teams, they all had a unique individual voice. How important was that for you casting wise, making sure you didn't have two guys who were essentially the same character?
Yeah, I mean maybe in some ways it would streamline things if there were more similarities. But what I wanted, this overflow of unique personalities and faces and voices, and just kind of, I think there's license to do that in a film that is so narratively simple, that is really about one game that is the last game, and everyone's kind of going through the same thing. They all have this slowly dawning realization of the end of this ritual that they all share. So you kind of have the license to kind of move around between a large ensemble who are all experiencing similar feelings. But yeah, we wrote, like I said before, we wrote a box score, and we also, in addition to that, we had these sort of like top down maps of a baseball field, and who plays where, and we'd find faces online that we felt fit a certain archetype of player. Because I think when you play on a team, you do kind of create a version of yourself. You're kind of like modeling it after other people that play that position, whether they're professional players or people you'd seen in movies. So, we were always thinking about that. And once we got to casting, it was just really fun to try to like hunt for the faces that matched those archetypes as best we could.
We all know him, whether as a player or an umpire, definitely. And you mentioned modeling, and you had a quote from Ricky Henderson, part of those interstitials. And rest in peace, Ricky. He's a guy I grew up. That was my guy in the '80s. So I'm glad it was nice to see a Ricky Henderson quote. So tip of the cap on that one as well.
One of his last semi-professional games was played in Nashua, New Hampshire, at my hometown ballpark, Homan Stadium. So, R.I.P. Ricky.
I'm so glad I got to see him play. He and Tony win both growing up. Carson, I want a two-pronged question to wrap up before we let you go here. And well, thank you again. And folks, you're watching the All Over the Place podcast. We've got the director, co-writer, producer, editor, Carson Lund from the movie Eephus, and baseball, of course, growing globally. And as you've taken this movie, whether you're barnstorming in the U.S., where you've got that built-in love for the game. Well, first off, what has the response been like here in the States? And then also, as baseball is growing globally, as you take it, whether to Cannes or other places around the world, what's the response been like for places where baseball may still be growing?
It's been really gratifying to see it connect with people all around the world, even people who have no understanding of how the game works. I've spoken to people after festival screenings that said, I don't understand anything that just happened, but I understood it completely.
Yeah.
Like they didn't follow the game, or why there were runners on certain bases, or any of that stuff, but they sort of grasped at what the film is saying about male bonding and passage of time and mortality. So that's really great, because I do think film language transcends the subject. You can make a film about like you could make a sci-fi, and I'm not going to understand all the language that's being used. I certainly don't
Mhm.
understand what they're talking about in Dune, but you still feel it. Um, so I think it ultimately doesn't really matter what the subject is, if you can tell a story and connect with the people that are on screen. So it has played really well abroad. I think it's played a little differently here in America, in a way that I think has been in some ways more gratifying, knowing that being able to talk to people who say this film reminded me of my playing days, or it reminds me of a hockey league I'm in, or a bowling league, or it reminds me of a group of friends that I once had. I think that's really special, because people are able to understand kind of the secret language of baseball and its history, and then that kind of informs the film and helps you understand it on another level. So yeah, it just kind of, this film just kind of keeps giving. It's been amazing, a long process, and now it's finally bearing fruit. So
Well, I love it. And I once heard Ron Shelton say, no matter how much they try to destroy baseball, they're not going to do it. It's always going to be our national pastime. And Carson, Lund, thank you so much for making Eephus. I'm looking forward to. I'm going to make. I'm going to take my little freshman baseball team out here. We're going to make sure we get to a screening so they
great.
can check out and realize that baseball's not as fast as they maybe want it to be.
Yeah, teach those whippersnappers the good old game.
Exactly. Thank you for making a movie that intersects all these different characters. Very Altman-esque, very Linklater-esque. I love that you just get to know everybody on that screen. So baseball man to baseball man, cap off to you. And thank you very much, Carson, for joining us here on All Over the Place.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All Over the Place, where the fun sanity never ends.